Greetings, fellow book lovers, and welcome back to Colin's Corner. Today we're going to be going over my favorite reads from the first half of the year, but before we get into this video, we have to go over the answer from the last Comedy with Colin segment, where I asked you guys the joke, who invented King Arthur's Round Table? The answer? Circumference. Alrighty, with that out of the way, let me explain my plans kind of for this video. So what I want to do is make a list of just my top 10 favorite reads of the first half of the year. And then I will make another list of my top 10 favorite reads for the second half of the year, hopefully in December. And then sometime early in 2024, I want to use the 20 books on these two lists that I've created to try to sort through and somehow pick my 10 favorite reads of 2023. So this is going to be the first installment. I know it's a little bit late. We're past the halfway point, but it's taken me a little while to compile this list. So there will be no rereads on this list, but I don't have any other stipulations as far as like only one book per author. These are just going to be my favorite reading experiences that I had so far this year. So book number 1 is going to be The Return of the King by none other than J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, I said in my wrap-up video that I really am a sucker for a series kind of coming to an end and character arcs being concluded, and you know, reading through The Lord of the Rings for the first time will absolutely go down as one of the most magical reading experiences I've ever had. You know, from setting out in the beginning of this journey, I was wide-eyed and bushy-tailed right alongside our hobbits, and you know, as they set out on their journey, I felt emotionally like I was going on this journey with them. So it was really incredible to see what Tolkien had created, the world that he created, just kind of expanding as this series moved on. And I can definitely foresee many rereads of this series happening over the course of my life. Book number 2 is going to be Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. So I've been hearing a lot about Blake Crouch over the past 2 or 3 years, I would say, on BookTube. And, you know, sci-fi is a genre that I do want to dig deeper into. But I've been meaning to prioritize it more. And I wanted to kind of start with something that's not so intense on the science aspect of sci-fi, but that was still engaging and still fun. And Dark Matter fit this bill just about perfectly. So this is extremely high stakes, fast paced. It's a sci-fi thriller, and it had me gripped from literally the very first chapter. I flew through this book. The science was not trying to be too highbrow. The concepts were there, but you know, they were not displayed in a way that excluded anybody who didn't have a degree in some kind of science. You know, yes, the concepts were there. If I wanted to go and look online to understand them more deeply, I could have. But I got the gist of it, and therefore I was able to follow the plot without worrying too much about it. Crouch's writing style is extremely accessible. He writes in this style that's kind of like shorter, choppier sentences, shorter paragraphs, but it actually, for me at least, it added to the intensity of the read. It added to the intensity of the mystery, of the thriller, of the stakes of this book. So I really enjoyed that writing style. I know I've seen online in some spaces that kind of rubs people the wrong way, but it worked really well for me. If you didn't see the video, it was one of my very first videos towards the beginning of my channel. The reason that I read this book was I did a video called Book Shopping with Haley, where I let my daughter pick a book for me to read based on just reading the first line of 5 different books. And Dark Matter is the one that she picked, so I'm going to have to give a shout out to her for picking one of my favorite reads of the year so far. Alright guys, book number 3 is going to be Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This book felt like a fever dream for me the whole time. What Susanna Clarke packed into this book that was less than 300 pages was so incredibly different than anything that I've read. Piranesi had, obviously, you know, if you've read it, you know, one of the most imaginative settings that I think I've experienced in a book. I read this book in March, and I still find myself from time to time thinking about what happened in this book. What did it mean? What was she trying to say about just kind of existence, I guess? So there was a lot of really cool themes explored in this book. I had tons of questions throughout my journey in Piranesi. However, I was so invested in the characters and the setting that my confusion, although I was aware of it, kind of took a back seat, and I was kind of enjoying this feeling of being almost like floating out on a body of water in a boat, not tethered to anything, and just kind of seeing where the water, or Susanna Clark in this case, was going to take me. I understand that this type of book might not be for everybody, and that completely makes sense. But if you are in the mood for something that's just totally different, more than likely than anything that you've read, and you just want to try like a new experience, I highly suggest picking up Piranesi. Like I said earlier, it's really short. It's less than 300 pages. So, you know, even if it isn't really for you, it's not too much of a time investment. So that's also a bonus. All right, book number 4 is going to be The Way of Edan by fellow booktuber Dr. Philip Chase. His channel name is The Best of Fantasy, by the way. Now, this is the first book in Chase's Edan trilogy. It is evident that this book was penned by the hand of somebody that has a true and deep love and also a great amount of respect for the fantasy genre. If you're watching my channel, you probably already know who Philip Chase is, but if you have not gone to visit his channel yet, please go and check his channel out. What he does for not only the booktube community, but the fantasy fandom in general is truly inspiring, and he has given me tons of recommendations and advice on how to be a better reader just through watching his many videos over the last couple of years. So I do want to preface this just by saying, please go and check Philip Chase out on YouTube, and please go and check Philip Chase's book out as well. You know, I truly believe that with The Way of Edan, fans of both modern and classical fantasy can find a home here. Chase manages to blend the feel of modern fantasy with a modern and unique voice that isn't shy about his influences at all, however, still manages to be uniquely Chase's voice. And that was one of my favorite aspects of reading this book. There are some very fun characters to follow, a unique magic system that I can't wait to learn more about in The Prophet of Edan, which is the second book in the series, and some really, truly hateable villains. This book has some very gripping conflict based around a holy war and a religion. And another bonus is that the entire trilogy will be released by the end of the year. I'm not sure entirely when the third book in the trilogy will be released, but The Prophet of Edan is out now. So if you are somebody that doesn't like to wait too long, as some authors in the genre like to make us do, this is a great series to hop into because it will all be out this year, so you can just kind of bang all 3 of them out and get the whole story. Book number 5 is going to be Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. Spoiler alert, this is not going to be the only Robin Hobb book on this list. I was hesitant to go into this book and put it off for a little while because I was being a little bit grumpy that I wasn't going to be reading about Fitz and the crew from the Farseer trilogy. But man, I wish I would have stopped stamping my little feet and having my little temper tantrum and just picked this stinking series up like so many people told me to do, because this series in general blew me away, but this book was so awesome. I became so attached to so many of these characters so quickly, and there was even a scene that happened, I would say like about 150, 200 pages into this book, where Colin was still like, I'm still mad that we don't have Fitz. This really emotional scene happened, and this tends to be something that happens when I read Hobb books. My investment in the story and the characters happens so sneakily, and it hit me hard, and I was like, I didn't even know I cared about these characters this much yet. But if I'm this emotionally affected by it, it must be that I do care about them. And Hobb has a way of doing that. And I can't really put my finger on it, but I think that's part of the reason that, she's so quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. With this third-person narrative, which is a massive shift from the first person we get in Farseer, this world suddenly felt so much bigger than I had pictured it being in my head in the Farseer trilogy. And the other thing throughout this first book that became, true towards the end of it, there really wasn't a single POV character, since we get so many. There wasn't a single one that I didn't enjoy following. So that is just a true testament to what Hobb is able to do with her character work, and I am so happy that I finally got to the Live Ship Traders. Book number 6 is going to be A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. This book should win a whole heap of awards, and it probably has, but it should also win an award for being aptly named. So much happens in this book. It literally is a storm of swords. So if you're watching this and are unaware, I'm currently working my way through A Song of Ice and Fire for the first time. I've never read the books. I've watched the show, though. So I generally know the storyline up until, obviously, there's no more content for them to adapt from. But I am so glad that I finally decided to pick the books up, because so that is one of my favorite shows of all time, but so many people still somehow said that the books are just so much better. And that's something, many readers hear and many readers say, myself included. But I think for me, that is certainly the case with these books. I mean, I am just absolutely engrossed in these stories whenever, I'm in the middle of one of these books. And the length just doesn't seem to matter. Like, I continue just flipping the pages and flipping the pages, and I can't get enough of it. He has this way of leaving every single chapter being a cliffhanger into just having to get to the next one until I'm laying in bed at night and I literally physically can't read anymore. There's so many series-altering plot events happening within just this one book that it's almost unbelievable that Martin was able to pack it all into this volume and not have it feel like just being there for shock value. So if you've read it, so I don't need to linger too much on this one, but I will just say that this book delivered and lived up to the hype that I've heard over the past couple of years. And it is without a doubt one of, if not the best crafted, in terms of just the plot, fantasy books that I've ever read. Alrighty, book number 7 is going to be Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I picked this up to kind of continue my theme of incorporating more sci-fi into my reading, but not getting into the too hardcore type of sciencey sci-fi quite yet. I could not get enough of this book. Up until pretty recently, it was actually my favorite read of the year. So that has obviously to carry some weight on this list, and unless I have the best 6 months of reading of my entire life in the second half of this year, I cannot foresee a scenario where this probably will not end up on my list of my favorite reads of 2023. I do have a review for this one on the channel, so I won't gush too much about it. And there were certainly some things that I had a little bit of problems with that I did talk about in the spoiler section of that video. But, needless to say, Andy Weir and Blake Crouch do something similar in terms of how the science is incorporated in their books. And there's certainly more science in this one, but I got kind of the same effect. The science was there. If you know about it, you could fact check it. I don't, so I didn't. But I didn't really question it. It sounded like it was, it sounded like it was right and that it worked. So I kind of went with it. It never stopped me from suspending my disbelief and just getting into this story. It's not written in a gatekeepy kind of way where you feel like you need to be a member of a scientific community to understand it. I love the plot of this book. It is hands down, it has one of my favorite relationships that I've ever read, which I cannot get into on here just because of spoilers. But again, like I said, if you've read it, then you know. But yeah, I cannot stop gushing about this book. Go ahead and watch my review if you want to hear my spoilery thoughts on this. But one last thing for this, if you have Audible, please do the audiobook for this. And if you have, let me know what you thought of this book. So I had an absolute blast with this book. Book number 7, Project Hail Mary. Alrighty, book number 8 is going to be Mad Ship. Again by Robin Hobb. And spoiler alert again, this will still not be the last Robin Hobb book on this list. So this is book 2 of the Live Ship Traders trilogy. And this book, to me, didn't suffer from second book syndrome at all. We got a lot of what I wanted in this book. We got even closer to the characters in this book. We got to explore parts of Hobb's world and parts of this map that I've been yearning to just get to and just to learn more about in this book. Finally, we get that. So that was really exciting. And then we also get a lot of hints and a lot of ability to theorize based on what we get in this book about how these events in the Live Ship Traders are going to ultimately connect back to the North in the events that happened in the Farseer trilogy. So we learn a ton more about how exactly the magic in this book is working, and that was really cool. And it kind of just checks all the boxes for me. I could not put this book down. Like, again, Hobb's books tend to take maybe 100 or so pages for me to like really get into it, but it's not that I don't enjoy them. It's just that I don't even realize how invested I really am until some little thing happens, and then I'm like, oh my god, like, now I have to know. So yeah, Mad Ship was a fantastic continuation of Ship of Magic. And again, this second book is probably one of the better second books in the series that I've read overall. Book number 9 is going to be Jade Legacy. Now, if I didn't read the Live Ship Traders, there probably would have been at least one more entry from the Greenbone Saga on this list, because I did read the entire Greenbone Saga this year. However, this was my favorite in the entire trilogy, was Jade Legacy. This series was such a breath of fresh air in the fantasy genre that pulled influences from old style gangster movies like The Godfather, Goodfellas, and Scarface in the best way possible. The unique magic system based around the use of this bioenergetic jade that was mined from the earth and used to grant or enhance abilities in human beings with bloodline and training to utilize it safely was just such an awesome magic system, and it's something that's unique to other things that I've read. Lee created with this series a world and a culture and people in that culture that felt lived in. It felt like the culture in Greenbone and the customs that were apparent in the different areas of the map were things that have existed for hundreds of years. Essentially, what Fond du Lis did with this series is gave us just a glimpse of a few generations worth of people that have been living in this culture and fighting in these clan wars for hundreds of years. And we got really close to, especially the Call family that we follow. And we even got to know a lot about a lot of members of the opposing clan that they've been fighting. So this book, I thought, with Jade Legacy, really ended the series in a way that I enjoyed personally a lot. I know it didn't work for some people, but this was, I think, for what it was, for what the book was trying to be, I thought it was almost perfect. All right, guys, last but not least, book number 10 is going to be Ship of Destiny, the third and final installment in the Live Ship Traders trilogy. The conclusion of this series left me feeling such an incredibly wide range of emotions. The journey that we get to go on with this cast of characters solidified for me that Hobb, in terms of authors that I've read, is almost unmatched in her character work. If I were to remove the Live Ship Traders from the greater Realm of the Elderlings 16-book series and just treat it as its own trilogy, I would say that it is one of, if not, probably close to my favorite trilogies that I've ever read. Hobb just continues to show me what the fantasy genre allows an extremely talented writer to do. And in this world that is undoubtedly fantastical and full of magic of its own, Hobb is able to create characters that and events and themes that parallel real life so closely. I cannot wait to continue my journey through the rest of the Realm of the Elderlings, starting with Tawny Man trilogy here this month. And throughout the rest of this year and certainly into next year, I won't be able to finish it this year. But yeah, the live ship traders, Ship of Destiny, the way that this ended, solidified again for me that Hob is top tier. That's going to do it for today's video. This was an incredibly difficult list to make, and I already feel like I have regrets, but it is live now, so there's nothing that I can do about it. So we will revisit this in later in the year and see if it still holds up. But as of right now, I was just going through all the books that I've read and just going with my heart, picking my favorites. So before we end today's video, we have to do comedy with Colin. Today's joke, guys, is going to be, how does an ocean say hello? If you think you know the answer, drop it down in the comments below. Guys, tell me what some of your favorite reads at least were in the first half of the year. I hope you were all currently enjoying what you're reading, and remember, you're always welcome in Colin's Corner.